The carpet was brown. Not a nice brown, but the specific industrial, rental-grade brown that looked perpetually damp, even in July. It smelled like old coffee and desperate disinfectant. I hated that carpet. I hated the sound my kids' shoes made scraping across it when they came in from the cold. I was standing by the stove. Hamburger helper tonight. Again. The cheap kind. The one that tasted mostly of salt and disappointment. It was 5:47 p.m. The fluorescent light in the kitchen hummed a high, irritating note, like a trapped wasp. I felt it vibrating in my teeth. Ethan, he's 10 now, was trying to explain some algebraic concept he clearly didn't grasp. He used his fork as a pointer, waving it dangerously close to the pot. Mom, if X equals the amount of allowance I need and Y equals the amount Mark owes us, stop. X and Y don't apply to your father, buddy. He's a zero. A constant, irritating zero. It wasn't a good thing to say. I knew that. But the exhaustion, it had teeth. It gnawed at the polite parts of my brain until all that was left was grit and sarcasm. I hadn't slept properly in maybe 6 years, since the last time I saw a paycheck that covered all the bills without requiring 3 separate side gigs. Tonight, the pressure was behind my eyes. A dull, throbbing weight that felt like a migraine waiting for permission to explode. I leaned against the counter, the cheap laminate digging into the small of my back. I wore the same gray sweater I wore yesterday. It was comfortable, and I didn't have to think about it. Thinking was expensive. The memory hit me, uninvited, like a splash of cold grease. It always came when I was stressed, usually triggered by something stupid, like the sound of Ethan's voice or the smell of cheap dinner. The memory of Carol, Mark's mother, the source of all the real poison. It was 12 years ago. The OB-GYN confirmed the heartbeat. I was terrified. Mark was thrilled, briefly. Carol? She was a storm front. The kitchen back then was huge. Granite countertops, Viking range. Her house was always too clean. Smelled faintly of furniture polish and expensive regret. She sat me down at the massive dark wood table. Mark was hiding upstairs, pretending to reorganize his baseball card collection. He was already practicing disappearing acts. She didn't start with congratulations. She started with the accusation. You trapped him. The words weren't loud, but they were precise. Cut glass. I remember staring at the pattern on her china saucer. Tiny blue flowers that suddenly seemed hideous. What? My voice was thin, like wet paper. Don't play innocent, Christina. You knew he wasn't ready. You knew he had a path. Law school, New York. You cut his legs out from under him with this accident. She emphasized the word accident, like it was a contagious disease I had intentionally contracted. I didn't trap anyone, Carol. We used protection. Things happen. She laughed. A short, dry, terrible sound. Oh, things happen. Convenient things for girls like you. You saw the pedigree. The trust fund, however limited. You saw your way out of whatever trailer park you crawled out of. I stood up so fast the chair scraped the floor, a sound that finally brought Mark halfway down the stairs. He stopped when he saw his mother's face. He always stopped. My parents own a hardware store in Ohio, I said, my chest tight. We don't live in a trailer park. Details, Christina. The point remains. You are a distraction, and now you have manufactured a permanent chain. She looked down at my stomach, flat still, but holding the secret. I will ensure that child is cared for, financially. But understand this, you will never be family, and you will never take Mark away from his potential. That day, I learned the true definition of cold. It wasn't the air outside. It was the empty space behind her eyes. That was the day Mark began to vanish, piece by piece, under the weight of her expectations. He didn't leave physically for 3 more years, but emotionally, he packed his bags right then, and she kept her promise. She paid for the expensive stroller. She sent clothes, but every gift was laced with venom. Every check written was an indictment. These bastard children of yours, she'd say to me during supervised drop-offs, pretending the kids couldn't hear. They require so much. A shame Mark never learned to control himself. I swallowed it. I had to. I needed the child support. I needed the occasional grudging check she wrote for their healthcare deductibles. I needed the stability her name, however despised, offered. Then came the quiet years. Mark finally walked out when Ethan was 3, and Maya was just a year old. No note, just gone. A text message sent from a burner phone 2 states away. I can't do this anymore. Carol was right. He stopped paying the child support 6 months later. Vanished completely. No forwarding address. Just a black hole where a father used to be. The legal system chewed up my savings and spat out frustration. They couldn't find him. He was a ghost. I called Carol. Begged, really. I needed the money. The kids needed the money. "Oh, did my son finally grow a spine?" she asked sweetly when I called her home phone. "Good for him. He doesn't owe you anything, Christina. You made your bed. Now lie in it. And stop calling here." The line went dead. That was 6 years ago. 6 years of working double shifts at the clinic. 6 years of eating hamburger helper. 6 years of patching holes in the walls and holes in my budget. 6 years of building this life from the rubble Mark and Carol left behind. A life that was fragile, functional, and fiercely mine. The pot on the stove bubbled aggressively. I stirred the pinkish sauce, the steam fogging my glasses. "Dinner in 5, I called out. Maya, who is 7 and far too observant, came into the kitchen. Her dark hair was messy. She had been drawing on the floor. She pointed at the calendar hanging crookedly on the fridge. "Mom, you have the night shift on Wednesday, right?" "Yeah, honey. Mrs. Rodriguez is coming over." "Good. I like her cookies." I smiled weakly. Cookies were another expense I couldn't really afford, but Mrs. Rodriguez understood the economy of small joys. The air outside was thick and gray, pressing against the dirty apartment windows. I watched a car pull up to the curb, a big black sedan, too nice for this street, this neighborhood. My stomach clenched. I didn't recognize the car, not the repo man, not the landlord. Too fancy. The driver's side door opened. A man in a dark suit got out, walked quickly around the front, and opened the passenger door. And then she stepped out. Carol. She looked exactly the same, only maybe sharper, thinner, more severe. Her silver hair was coiled perfectly. She wore a tailored suit the color of dried blood and a pair of sunglasses that hid half her face. She looked like she was arriving for a funeral, which, considering our history, made a terrible kind of sense. What in God's name did she want? After 6 years of silence, 6 years of me struggling, 6 years of her enjoying Mark's disappearance as proof of my failure. She didn't look at the apartment building. She looked past it, as if searching for something cleaner, better. Then, she adjusted her massive leather purse on her shoulder and started walking toward my broken entryway gate. The sound of her expensive heels on the cracked pavement was unnaturally loud. Click, click, click. My hands started shaking. I turned off the stove. The kitchen light suddenly seemed blinding. "Kids," I whispered, my voice rough. "Go to your room. Now." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Go. Play quiet. I mean it." They sensed the shift, the panic in my tone. They moved fast, disappearing down the narrow hall. I walked to the door, slowly, deliberately. I didn't lock it. I wanted this confrontation to happen here, in my space, under the glare of my cheap, buzzing fluorescent light. I pulled the gray sweater tighter around my arms, trying to feel solid, trying to feel like the woman who survived 6 years alone, not the girl who let Carol cut her down 12 years ago. She reached the door. She didn't knock. She pressed the doorbell once, a long, demanding ring that sounded like a verdict. I took a deep breath, tasting the metallic tang of fear and leftover salt from the hamburger helper. I opened the door maybe 6 inches. The cold air rushed in, carrying the scent of her expensive perfume, gardenia and pure entitlement. She removed her sunglasses slowly, revealing eyes that were still cold, still blue, but somehow different. They were ringed with exhaustion I had never seen on her face before. She didn't offer a greeting. She just looked me up and down, taking in the gray sweater, the tired apartment, the evidence of my constant struggle. A flash of familiar superiority crossed her face, quickly masked by something else. Desperation. "Christina," she said. Her voice was strained, lower than I remembered. "We need to talk." I leaned against the doorframe, trying to look unimpressed. trying to project strength I didn't feel. You stopped talking to me 6 years ago, I said. The day you called my daughter a fiscal burden. She flinched. Not a big flinch, just a tight pull around her eyes. The kind of muscle spasm you get when you're trying to look calm, but everything inside is yelling. The hallway air was thick. November cold pressed hard against the cheap, rattling glass of the entry door behind her, but the air around her was warm and cloying, smelling of expensive jasmine perfume and guilt. I recognized the scent. Mark used to buy it for her every Christmas, the years before he realized he had actual bills to pay. That was a long time ago, Christina. Her voice was still low, raspy, like she hadn't used it for a while, or maybe she'd been shouting at someone else recently. It was 6 years and 4 months ago, Carol. I keep track of things like that. Milestones. I didn't invite her in. I kept the door open maybe 6 inches, enough for her profile. She was wearing a thick, dark wool coat, the kind that cost more than my car payment. It looked clean, pressed, but her hair, her perfect silver salon hair, was flat, lifeless. It was the first time I had ever seen Carol look anything less than magazine-ready. Can we stop standing in the doorway? My knees are giving out. They look fine to me, I said. I crossed my arms tighter, pushing my fists into my ribs. I needed the pain. It grounded me. My kids are doing homework. They don't need the distraction of seeing the woman who threatened to sue me for parental alienation before Mark even finished packing his socks. Carol inhaled sharply through her nose. It was a sound of pure aristocratic irritation, a sound I had spent a decade trying to forget. This isn't about the past, Christina. This is about Mark. Everything is about the past, I countered. And Mark stopped being about anything 6 years ago when he took his last paycheck and bought a ticket to nowhere. What about him? Did he finally send a postcard saying, "Sorry, I missed their entire childhoods"? I let the sarcasm hang there, heavy and metallic, like the taste of old pennies. Carol shifted her weight. I noticed the coat wasn't just expensive, it was heavy. Too heavy for this weather, even for November in upstate New York, like she was trying to hide something under it. Or maybe she hadn't taken it off in days. He is gone, Christina. You know this. I know he stopped paying support. I know he missed every birthday. I know the court issued a warrant for failure to appear 5 years ago. Gone is a generous term for deadbeat abandonment, wouldn't you say? My throat was getting tight. I swallowed, feeling the dry scrape of anger. I looked past her shoulder at the street. The light was fading fast. A thin, miserable drizzle had started, making the asphalt slick and reflecting the sickly yellow glow of the street lamp. The air smelled like wet dog and dead leaves. I need your help finding him, Christina. I stared at her. The request was so audacious, so stupidly entitled, that for a second, I thought I had misheard. I actually leaned forward, straining my neck. Are you joking? I have tried everything. The police, private investigators, they just cycle back to the same stale report. Possible sighting in Arizona. No confirmation. I need you to think. Think about what, Carol? Which cheap motel bathroom he was in when he decided he didn't want kids anymore? I spent years thinking about Mark. I am done. But you were the last one to really know him, she pressed. Her voice had dropped to a whine now, slightly desperate, losing its edge of old money authority. Before he broke, I laughed. It was a short, bitter sound that came out without my permission. My stomach clenched, a sudden cold knot forming below my diaphragm. He wasn't broken, Carol. He was selfish, and I didn't know him. I knew the college boy who told me he loved me. Then I knew the useless man who hid my birth control pills because he wanted a baby to stabilize his life. You taught him that, didn't you? That the world existed to provide him with convenience. She actually looked hurt. A real, deep, personal offense. You trapped him, Christina. You always knew he wasn't ready for fatherhood. I warned him. The blood rushed hot to my face. 6 years. 6 years of silence. 6 years of struggling. And she still pulled out the same goddamn accusation. You came here to my door. After I raised 2 kids alone while working 3 jobs and skipping my own meals sometimes, to tell me I trapped your spoiled failure of a son? My voice was loud now, echoing off the narrow walls of the communal hallway. I saw movement inside my apartment. A shadow crossed the living room doorway. Ethan, my oldest, probably heard the yelling. I immediately lowered my voice, forcing the rage down into a cold, lethal whisper. "Get off my property, Carol." "No, wait, please." She reached out, her hand extended toward my arm. I instinctively jerked back, hitting my elbow on the doorframe. The wood was old and chipped. I hated this apartment. I hated that she saw me here. I am serious. I am desperate. I lost the house. That stopped me. Not the pity, but the shock. Carol lived in the colonial mansion on River Road, the one with the circular driveway and the tennis courts. Mark's family had owned it for 3 generations. What are you talking about? The house? The debt. Mark. He took out loans. Big ones. We didn't know until the bank started calling last year. He mortgaged the property, Christina. He emptied the retirement accounts. He took everything. She didn't look at me when she said it. She looked down at her expensive leather boots, which were now dotted with the miserable November rain. I felt a dizzying wave of vindication and disbelief. Mark, the golden boy, the financial analyst who couldn't manage his own checking account, had torpedoed his entire family fortune before vanishing. "And you think I care about your house?" I asked, my voice dangerously flat. "I live in a unit where the dishwasher leaks when the upstairs neighbor flushes. You worried about property values while my kids wore shoes with holes in the soles." She finally looked up, and I saw it clearly now. The raw, unadulterated fear. Her eyes were red-rimmed and swollen. Not from tears, maybe, but from lack of sleep. "I am broke, Christina. Absolutely broke. I've been staying with my sister in Buffalo, but she's selling the condo. I have nowhere to go. And that's my problem because..." She took another shaky breath. The jasmine perfume was overwhelming. "I need money. Just enough to find a small place. And I need access to Mark's legal trust funds. They named you the secondary guardian years ago, before everything." I laughed again, harder this time. My chest hurt. The trust funds? The $20 savings bond he opened when Ethan was born? Stop lying. Mark didn't have a legal trust fund. Mark had a gambling problem and a lack of moral fiber. No, the real trust. The one his grandfather set up. Mark was supposed to access it on his 45th birthday next month. If he is declared missing or deceased, the funds are split between his immediate family, his mother, and his children. I felt a cold prickle spread over my scalp. This was new information. This was the real reason she was here. Not to find Mark, but to secure her half of a forgotten inheritance. "You cut me off for 6 years, I repeated, slowly, letting the weight of the years settle between us. "You called me a gold digger, a trailer trash tramp, and a burden. You told me my kids were accidents. Now you want me to help you claim Mark's money?" Carol straightened her spine, briefly regaining a shred of her old arrogance. "It's my money, Christina. I raised him. I deserve it. And I raised his kids, alone. I deserve it more." A silence stretched, thick and painful. I could hear the faint, high-pitched noise of the old gas furnace struggling to heat my apartment. "Look," Carol whispered, leaning closer, her voice conspiratorial. "I know you hated me. I know I said terrible things. But Mark is the common denominator here. He ruined both of our lives. If you help me file the paperwork, if we declare him legally deceased, we can both get out of this mess. I'll make sure the children are taken care of. Properly taken care of this time." I felt a deep, sickening lurch in my stomach. Properly taken care of. As if my care hadn't been enough. "You haven't seen them since they were toddlers, Carol? You wouldn't recognize them. Ethan is 10, Maya is 7. Maya is terrified of heights. Ethan hates green beans. And they both think their father is an astronaut who took a very long trip." I watched her face carefully. I needed to see if the mention of her grandchildren elicited anything beyond annoyance. Nothing. Just impatience. "I can pretend to care, Christina. If that's what the court requires, we can present a unified front. I can tell them I realize the errors of my past. I can even apologize to you." "Apologize for what, exactly?" I pushed. I wouldn't let her use cheap words. She swallowed hard, looking away again, back at the miserable street. "For calling you a trap. For not supporting you. For being cruel. Say it again." She hesitated, her lips trembling. "I am sorry, Christina. I was wrong. You did not trap Mark. He was weak. You were strong. He abandoned you all. Now can we move on? It was hollow. A performance. But it was the closest I would ever get to an admission of guilt from Carol. A small, dry victory. I took a slow breath, letting the cold air sting my lungs. My mind was racing. If Mark was declared deceased, the money could finally stabilize my life. It could pay off the credit card debt I'd racked up keeping them fed. It could get us out of this moldy apartment. But the thought of collaborating with her, of giving her even a fraction of power over my life again, made my skin crawl. You're telling me that Mark is definitely dead, I stated, not a question. She nodded rapidly, her desperation overwhelming her sense of self-preservation. He has to be. Nobody just disappears for 6 years, leaving behind millions. Unless… She trailed off, her eyes getting wide, looking past me into the dark apartment. Unless what, Carol? She leaned in close, whispering so low I had to strain to hear her over the faint whine of the heater. Her breath smelled of mint and desperation. The police told me something. They found his car last year, months after the official search ended, down near the Mexican border, cleaned out. But inside the glove compartment… She paused, looking deeply into my eyes, searching for something. Pity? Compliance? I gave her nothing but stone. Inside, they found a small, cheap plastic crucifix, the kind you buy at a roadside stop. Mark hated religious iconography. He always did. So, she continued, her voice trembling violently now. I recognized it. It wasn't his. It was yours. You had it hanging on your rearview mirror the whole time you two were dating. When you left, you must have left it behind. My blood ran cold. The crucifix. Yes. I had bought it on a spring break trip years ago. I hadn't thought about it in a decade. I remembered leaving it in Mark's old Honda when I finally packed my things. Why would that mean he's dead? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, trying to find the flaw in her logic. Because, Carol whispered, tears finally welling up, thick and fast, blurring the lines of her carefully applied mascara. He always told me that if he ever got rid of that thing, it meant he was finally free of you. Totally free. He hated that cross, Christina. He hated what it represented. But he never, ever threw it away. She wiped a tear that left a black streak across her cheek. The facade was completely gone. The police think it was a warning, a message to whoever found the car. But I know Mark. He left it for me to find. He left it to show me that he died finally clean of your influence. And he died broke, knowing the bank would take the house. It was his last, perfect, vicious act of revenge on both of us. I stood there, paralyzed by the weight of her words. Mark calculating his own disappearance and financial ruin as a final, precise bomb aimed at his mother and me. He didn't just vanish, Christina, Carol concluded, her voice now barely a ragged breath. He engineered his own death to hurt us. He's gone, and he took everything he could with him. Help me get the trust fund. It's the only way to prove he lost. We can split it. We can both win. I looked at her, standing in the drizzle, stripped of her dignity, offering me a cut of the financial ruin Mark had wrought, offering me stability in exchange for complicity. I thought about Ethan and Maya, 10 and 7, still asking when Daddy would return from space. I thought about the 6 years of struggle. I thought about the house, the debt, the shame. No, I said finally. The word was cold, solid, and absolute. Carol stared at me, dumbfounded. No? Why? You hate him? You need the money. I hate you more, I stated simply. And the thought of sharing $1 with you after everything you've done makes me sick. You can tell the court whatever you want, Carol. You can tell them I'm the gold digger you always thought I was. But I will file a countersuit. I will fight you for every cent of that trust fund. And I will use every terrible thing you ever said about my children as evidence of your unfitness to receive a single dime. I will paint your son as the criminal he was, and I will make sure the kids get everything they deserve. I leaned in, my face inches from hers. The expensive jasmine was overpowered by the smell of the damp wool coat. And if he comes back? If he tries to crawl out of whatever hole he dug himself into? I smiled. A tight, cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. I won't tell you. I'll make sure he pays me every cent of back support first. Then I'll call the police. You can rot waiting for him to save you, Carol. I slammed the door, the cheap metal rattling violently in the frame. The sound was deafening in the sudden silence of the apartment. I stood there, breathing hard, listening to the muffled, desperate pounding on the other side. Christina, you can't. I have nowhere to go. He took my... I didn't move. The pounding faded to a frantic scratching, then stopped entirely. The only sound was the weak, struggling hum of the furnace and the faint, miserable sound of the rain outside. I stood in the dark hallway for a long time, the smell of jasmine already fading, replaced by the familiar scent of old dust and exhaustion. I felt the cold knot in my stomach loosen, replaced by a strange, sharp euphoria. I walked into the living room. Ethan and Maya were sitting on the rug, heads bent over their coloring books, pretending not to notice. "Mom?" Ethan asked softly, not looking up. "It's okay, honey," I whispered, rubbing the stiffness out of my neck. "Just a solicitor." I went to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood by the window overlooking the wet parking lot. I saw her, Carol, standing by her rental car, fiddling with the lock, her posture completely defeated. She looked small, miserable, and profoundly alone. I watched her get into the car. I watched the taillights turn on. Then I realized something. Mark had left the cross, my cross, in his abandoned car, not as a message for his mother, but as a final sick declaration of victory over me. He knew I would hear about it. He knew the narrative would get back to me. He had orchestrated his vanishing act perfectly, ensuring I would spend the rest of my life paying for his absence, while he watched the chaos from whatever beach he'd found. But he was wrong. He didn't win. He just gave me a massive, unpayable debt and a new goal. I took out my phone. The phone number for the attorney's office, the one I used for the custody hearings, was saved under hell. I typed out a message, my fingers shaky but steady. Subject: Mark M. Missing person filing. Need to discuss the deceased declaration process and that trust fund. I hit send. The rain outside intensified. I looked down at my reflection in the dark glass. I didn't look tired anymore. I looked like a woman who had just realized she was holding a loaded gun. I finished the water. I put the glass down on the counter. I walked back into the living room and sat down on the floor next to my children. I would find him, alive or dead, and I would take everything, all of it. The war wasn't over. It was just starting. And this time, I had a target. And I had Mark's mother's broken ambition as my shield. The light flickered once, then settled back into its weary glow.